Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Leela Rhodes and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us here at NetCom Learning, a market leader in promoting lifelong learning, training, and talent development solutions. We are very excited to host today's webinar, Simplifying Complex Projects with Scrum, and presenting today's topic is Jeff Allen. Jeff is an Agile certified subject matter expert with over 14 years of experience in providing trainings and consulting services. He has successfully coached over 6,000 PMP, PMI ACP, ASM, and PMI RMP candidates. He has organized and conducted seminars on the history of the United States and the Constitution throughout the state of California, performed public speaking and appearances on radio and TV. I just want you to keep in mind that this is an overview of a very robust topic. We do offer a collection of technical and business courses that can be tailored toward your specific requirements. If you're interested in a further discussion about any of those, you can make an appointment with our learning consultants through our website at www.netcomlearning.com. NetCom Learning helps customers build innovative learning organizations by achieving a smarter workforce, adopting change, and driving growth. We do this with a broad catalog of offerings, developing customized learning plans, and our global delivery capabilities. Since 1998, we have been empowering organizations with our managed learning services to help them reach optimal performance results and address challenges. We have 9 practice areas in which we specialize, and they encompass people, process, and technology training. Today's presentation is from the business process practice area. NetCom Learning offers a comprehensive training portfolio for business process courses. Our upcoming classes include Scrum Team Training, Scrum Product Owner e-learning, Extreme Programming, and much more. And private training to teams is also available. Those learning plans can also be customized to the specific needs of that audience. You can also access a variety of business process marketing assets, such as the free 1-hour training, free on-demand training, and blogs by clicking on the available webinar handout. And these offerings can also be found with a simple search on our website at www.netcomlearning.com. In this webinar, we will learn how to manage, measure, and implement Scrum projects in your organization and much more. And now I'm going to go ahead and pass the time over to Jeff to present today's topic. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeff. Jeff, are you with us?
I am. So it looks like we're ready to go. Okay, so as Leela was explaining, we're taking on the topic of simplify complex projects with Scrum. Our agenda is to cover the Scrum approach to project success, how to solve project problems with Scrum, establishing your Scrum team, and getting stories done in Scrum, and then carving out some time at the end for some questions and answers, which I expect you'll have a bunch. So let me go ahead and we'll jump into the first topic here. Okay, so the Scrum approach to project success. So a little funny thing to start out with here is, there's always the challenge between what the customer and the end user wants and what's actually delivered. And so, here's how the customer explained this project for a tree swing. Here's how the project lead understood it. Here's how the analyst designed it, how the programmer wrote it, how the business consultant described it, how the project was documented, what operations installed, how the customer was billed, how it was supported, and then what the customer actually wanted. And so that's always been the challenge when it comes to software and hybrid related projects, is being able to actually figure out how to understand and then deliver what the customer and end user wants. So there's 2 broad approaches to project management. One is traditional or waterfall. It's also called plan driven. It's also called predictive. And that's where on the front end, you do a minimal amount of requirements discovery. They get documented. You do big upfront planning. and then you deliver the results at the end of the project. The other approach, which is Agile, which was calculated to address some of those communication issues, as well as being, resistant to change like we are in Agile. And so Agile is not linear in its thinking. And so you discover and learn throughout the course of the project. And so there's incremental delivery and value that the customer and the end users experience as the project progresses from one iteration to another. There's a huge mindset shift when we change from from waterfall to Agile. And I borrowed this slide right here. And so, when we are doing Agile in Scrum, we have to think about it differently. There are 4 values, and we're not going to get into those right now. They're in the Agile Manifesto. They're supported by 12 guiding principles. And then there are a whole bunch of practices that contribute to how you actually complete work in a Scrum project. Now, when we take a look at the actual life cycle of Scrum, first of all, the scope of the project is treated and managed completely differently. There's no upfront planning. If there are changes that need to be done, there's no formal change control board that needs to approve of changes. And so the product owner, which is one of the roles in Scrum, is primarily responsible for getting input from customers and end users and creating a list of the functional requirements that are going to be delivered. And those are kept, they're maintained in what's called the product backlog. And then at the beginning of iteration, and in Scrum, we do iterations in duration of 1 to 4 weeks. And at the end of every one of those iterations, which is called a sprint, we deliver working results to the customer, the end user. And they can be deployed or shipped if they wanted. And so the first part of Scrum, starting a sprint, is a sprint planning meeting, and that's where the development team with the product owner determine which of those user stories or functional requirements are going to be completed during that sprint, whether it's 1 week or 4 weeks in duration. And then for those user stories, they're broken down into tasks, and the dev team assigns tasks to the individuals, and they're estimated in terms of time, and we do a sequencing and all those things that you would expect. And then after the sprint planning meeting is over, we move into the phase that's called story development. And story development is where the team actually does the work of completing the user stories, right? Completing the functionality that the customer wanted. During story development, every day the dev team does what's called a daily scrum, and that's a sync up meeting for them that goes back to the planning that was done in the sprint planning meeting. And then as we near the end of the sprint, there's going to be an event called the sprint review, where the dev team actually demonstrates to the product owner the completed work, and assuming that the product owner then accepts it, it's considered finished and is now ready to be shipped or deployed. And then the sprint is ended with a sprint retrospective, which is like a lessons learned meeting. It's where the dev team explores what went well, what did not go well, and what they're going to do differently starting with the next sprint. Now, at the end of every one of these sprints, that are 1 to 4 weeks in duration, there's value delivered, which is different than how it is in Waterfall. In Waterfall, the results of the project is delivered at the end of the project. It's a one-time delivery. But in Scrum, what we're doing is we're actually delivering working results at the end of every sprint. And so you can see, at least we're trying to show here, that how even after the end of sprint 1, a portion of the product has been completed and could be used. Now, I know you're going to have some questions on this, and we're probably going a little bit faster than you'd prefer, but jot down questions if you have them, and we can cover that later on. So in Scrum, there are three roles. There's the Scrum Master, the Product Owner, and the Dev Team. And the Dev Team is sized at 6 plus or minus 3. So that's 3 to 9 members. And then in addition to that, you have the Product Owner and the Scrum Master. Built into the Scrum framework are these events. There's the sprint itself, the sprint planning meeting, the daily Scrum, the sprint review, and the sprint retrospective. And then there are some artifacts that are used as part of the Scrum framework, and that's the product backlog, the sprint backlog, user story cards, and definitions of done. Agile and Scrum was invented. It was for small projects, as in one Scrum team like we just took a look at, and they would be co-located in a room, and they would, just work together in cranking out the work. But what's happened as Scrum and Agile has evolved and technology has become more robust, we do now what's called scaling Agile, which means we can now do large projects that include many resources. But what we do, instead of just increasing the size of the dev team, we stand up additional teams. So for example, I did some consulting on a Scrum project, an enterprise-side Scrum project, and we had 17 teams working off of the product backlog. Now, when you have multiple teams working on a project that's large and complex, we have to address how do the teams actually work effectively in parallel. The backlog of requirements, of course, is going to be much larger, and it's going to be managed by a team of product owners. Then you have all these teams that are actually, completing work, and then all of that has to be brought together, and the output of all of those teams has to play together, has to work. And so there's more testing and things that have to be done than if you just had a small, one team Scrum project. When it comes to estimating the size of the user stories, instead of each team doing that, it has to be standardized for the project. Also, there are functional, personnel, and technical dependencies across teams. And so it's not uncommon if you have multiple teams working on a scaled Scrum project that, a user story needs to be completed before another team can complete one of its user stories. So the output then is going to be consumed by, a downstream team. And so all those kinds of dependencies and sequencing issues have to be sorted out. And then non-functional requirements that have to do with architecture and design and things like that not only cannot be compromised, but they also have to be standardized. Because you can't have one team coming up with its idea on how they want to design things and another team doing it differently. Both teams may have come up with a solution that would work, but everybody has to be on the same page. And so in addressing these kinds of project problems in Scrum, first of all, we're going to have a product backlog that's still going to be in one place. All of the teams are going to be working off of that same product backlog. We're going to be grouping user stories or the requirements into bigger buckets to make it easier to plan, make it easier to push out the planning horizon effectively. Ideally, for every dev team, you would have a dedicated product owner and a dedicated Scrum Master. That's not always possible, and so what we kind of say is, worst case is you have a product owner that supports two teams. But, the product owner attends some of those meetings we were talking about, sprint planning, sprint review. And if the product owner is serving two teams, he or she cannot be in the same place at once. So it does create some challenges. And so whether you have a dedicated product owner for each team or, a product owner serving, a couple of teams, you're going to have a team of product owners. And collectively, they own the actual scope of the project. They decide. And then you're going to have a chief product owner that sits at the top of this team who ultimately makes the hard decisions with respect to the overall project. And then the team level product owners then will align with that. And then, how work gets done is another issue when it comes to solving project problems. So, we favor what are called feature teams. Feature teams are teams that take a user story and do everything from the beginning to the end. All of the creation, all of the testing, everything that needs to be done. And so when it's demonstrated, it's done and it could be used. There's another approach, which is often used in organizations that are transitioning from waterfall to agile and they're not quite ready to be fully agile. And that's where they have functional teams. And then a user story, instead of living with just one team from beginning to end, gets passed from one functional team to another. Like if you're doing a software project, it might go to the design team, and then it might go to the programming team, and then it might go to the testing team. And there could be others. So that's not favored, but it can be done. Now, when you have these multiple teams, right, in a scaled agile project, kind of drilling down on some of the problems, one of the things we have to pay attention to is synchronizing our sprint start and end dates. And so when we do a large project with Scrum, you solve a whole lot of problems by making sure that you don't stagger your sprints and you have all of the teams starting and ending at the same time. There could be some specialty teams that might have a different duration, but that would be more of an exception. So the ideal thing would be to have all of the teams working on the same calendar duration of the sprints, like 2 weeks, which is kind of the most common sprint duration. And then when you're doing the sprint planning and you have cross-team dependencies, you may need to do some, planning that's farther out, have a longer planning horizon. And if you have, a product owner or a Scrum Master serving multiple teams, you might actually have to stagger your sprints by a day. And so, when I've consulted on this, we just kind of end up calling like squishy starts and squishy ends. But in the project software, everything has the same start and the same end. And it ends up working out that way quite well. Because you have these multiple teams that are working on the same product backlog, what we often do is we create communities of practice across the teams. So these would be like virtual teams that would be made up of people who are dealing with some specialty items on their team. Like for each team, there'll be somebody that's working on architecture things. And so they have their own virtual team. And then there might be a user interface team, or there might be a testing team. And they sort out virtually how they're going to make sure that the standards are the same for all of the different teams, sort out some of the problems, etc. So, it's kind of like a baseball team, where you have the different roles. You have the catcher and the pitcher and the first baseman, but you have a whole bunch of pitchers. And so while there's only one pitcher that is, pitching at a time during a game, you have the pitchers together as a group, and they sort out and they work on and they practice and they work on how overall as pitchers, it can work for the team. Now, over time, this whole scaling type of thing has resulted in some formalized techniques on how to manage these kinds of projects. Probably the lightest weight version of managing a large scale Scrum project is called Scrum of Scrums. And this is where you have a representative or maybe two from each of the dev teams that meet together as needed. This is one of the Scrum events that is not time boxed. It's not held daily. It's not the Scrum Masters coming together. It's the dev team members, representative from each team. And then what they're doing is they're basically saying, what did we do what did my team do since our last Scrum of Scrums, and what are we going to do before the next Scrum of Scrums? And then you sort through the cross-team dependencies and address any potential issues that there might be with the product backlog. There's another approach called SAFE, Scaled Agile Framework. This is proprietary, and you can tell by just looking at this chart. And I think they're actually at version 5 now, but I took this screenshot back when it was 4. And this is very comprehensive. And there are even roles that are a part of SAFE, and you can even get certifications for it. And it goes from the strategic level for the organization all the way down through portfolios, programs, and projects. So very comprehensive. I have done SAFE, not fully implemented, but I understand it a bit. And if this were to be your solution for a scaled Scrum project, you're probably looking at spending some money to buy the software and buy the guidance and things like that. There's another one called Disciplined Agile. So this is based on, just like the others, on Scrum teams. Disciplined Agile is actually well suited for hybrid projects, where you have elements of both Agile and Waterfall coming together for the project. There's another one called Large Scale Scrum. This is another one that works well with the Scrum teams, but instead of having a whole bunch of product owners, you'll have one product owner. Your structure will be feature teams, not the functional teams. And, and it's flexible. Not a lot of prescriptive things that you're supposed to do if you use this approach. And there are even some others that are out there, and depending on the nature of your project, you may choose, one or another, until you kind of find what works for your organization. Now let's talk about some of the basics of your Scrum team, because that's kind of where it all happens.
We're going to hear from Nishad. He's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the upcoming promotions and webinar related courses. Nishad, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Leela. First of all, thank you everyone for joining us today. I would like to thank Jeff. Despite your health condition, you still ran the webinar. We appreciate that. Now, folks who joined here today, once again, we want to thank you for your presence. And as you can see my screen, even though it is not related to project management, NetCom has been awarded Microsoft Learning Partner of the Year in the entire globe. It is a big honor for a company around the world to become the #1 partner. And again, NetCom focuses on 9 different key practice areas, as Leela pointed out earlier. And today's discussion was around business processes. So besides the business process, we heavily offer tech classes, limited but not, not just on Microsoft, AWS, Google, but you can think of as a learning and development company pretty much for any of the initiatives that you may need assistance with. And today I would like to present to you a unique program, as a subscription that we are offering that probably would give you best bang for your buck if you are interested. So if you go to netcomlearning.com, underneath solutions page, the second one, it talks about NetCom Plus. I quickly want to walk you through this page so that you understand. It pretty much covers varieties of courses. So over 140 instructor-led virtual, just like what Jeff ran, instructor-led classes, technical, non-technical, business-related, and over 250 e-learning courses is part of it. So it's a 12-month subscription, 24/7 access, and out of that 140 classes, I mean, on average, most people attend in IT or non-IT, maybe 2 classes at the very most. But even if you choose to every single month, multiple classes, you have the option to do so. So we'll share the link, but quickly want to showcase this course in the subscription. It covers pricing is around $3,000, but if you are representing an organization that has 10 or more learners, pricing goes around $24.99. So it's a, if you think about a technical standpoint, one class pays for the entire subscription, and any of the additional classes that you would attend, it's technically free. And that would include all the courseware, all the labs, except for the exam vouchers. Pretty much everything is covered. So if you even think from a perspective of business, processes, on my left, I will just quickly show you Agile project management. And I'm not even picking the advanced Microsoft, or if you are interested, you'd be amazed. Just on those two categories, you have tons and tons of courses. That is Agile for executives, CAPM, BMI, introduction to project management, preparation for the project management, and again, risk management, and also Scrum courses are also part of that offering. So out of that 140 courses. So I just want to quickly show you, if you are interested just in real time, go to the link on NetCom Learning and, figure out things out. And if you have any question, we have, over 12 learning consultants who are highly trained in various programs who can assist you further. So once again, thank you for being here. Purpose of NetCom is to promote the values of lifelong learning. So you are going to have access to tons of free learning resources throughout the year. I look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Thank you, Leela.
Thank you so much. Okay, we have a bunch of questions to get to. So our first one, do you have a good resource for a more in-depth more in-depth look at user stories and story cards?
We do. So we have a clinic, a user story writing clinic. It's, different durations depending on how comprehensive you want it to be, but we take you through how you do the elicitation events. If you're the product owner, what are you looking for? How you write the user stories, that one sentence, and then we cover how the dev team and the product owner work together to put in all of the other necessary information into the story cards.
And just to add to that, Jeff, if I may, if I'm not sure who asked the question, if you want to have a 2-hour session around it, we can, if you're representing an organization, please reach out to us. NetCom offers 2 hours of free session around the topic that you're interested in project management. So we can certainly collaborate with Jeff or any of our highly competent trainers who can put together and train that specific topic.
Wonderful. Thank you for pitching in on that. Someone wanted to know if they'll get a copy of the recording, and yes, you will get a copy of the recording in the next 24 hours via email. Then that's a repeat question. Where can we find more information in Scrum? And what about large-scale Scrum from Jeff Sutherland?
Yeah, so none of those are as baked or matured as like SAFe is. Scrum of Scrum is the lightest weight, and what I covered was basically the overview, and you could do an internet search and get different people's views on how to do that. And somebody may have written a book that addresses Scrum of Scrums. If there's not a lot of detailed information, because it's really simple. It's just an event with an agenda that's very simple. What did my team do since our last Scrum of Scrums? What are we going to do between now and our next Scrum of Scrums? And what are the cross-team dependencies and other quality issues that we need to sort out, with the teams, I should say. Now, when it comes to the other one, which one was it? It wasn't SAFe. It was the large scale, the LESS one.
Large scale Scrum.
Yeah. So I don't know tons about that. I have not used it. And, this probably isn't scratching the itch, but we need to go online and search and see what's available. It's not popular. I should say it's not popular. It's not widely used is what we should probably say with that.
Okay, let's see. So any advice on converting from a waterfall command and control culture to a Scrum distributed leadership culture?
Yeah, that's a big challenge. So That's one of the worlds that I have lived in as a consultant. We call it being an agile coach. And so, you can do a training on all of the theories and how it works and the framework and all of that. And it's usually pretty easy to get the dev teams and the scrum masters and the product owners aligned with how you do scrum properly. That's the easiest part. The hardest part is to get the necessary buy-in from upper management to actually support that transition. Because remember when we were going through that slide about the mindset, it's completely different. The idea of upper management saying we need this done and this is your budget and this is your schedule actually does not work well in the Scrum environment at all. And so usually what organizations will do is they'll tap like a chief Scrum Master for the organization. And that chief Scrum Master will have the job of training upper management and then working with the individual teams as they adopt Scrum. One of the tactics that works well is if we're transitioning to actually pick a pilot project. So everybody agrees we're going to do this project using Scrum. And then we'll assemble the dream team, right? And it will ensure success. We'll learn things, and it will help management and other workers see how Scrum works and how effective it is. Did that answer your question well enough?
Oh, we will see. We're actually getting close on time. And then our other question, it's from the same person. They wanted to know if a newly scale-to-be startup is about to implement Scrum with 3 new Scrum Masters at different locations, what would be the best approach and best advice?
Oh, so that happens all the time. We live in a world where most projects have a distributed environment, where we have virtual team members. And so the number one thing, in my view, at least having, coached organizations and projects, is pick the tool you want to use. The tool I know the best is Microsoft's Agile tool called Azure DevOps. I know a little bit about Jira, which is Atlassian's tool. I know a little bit about version 1. But the team will pick its tool, and then those Scrum Masters will collaborate and say, okay, how are we going to customize the tool so that it's going to meet the needs of this project? And then the Scrum Masters then have the job of being the process coaches for their team members and say, okay, here's how you can use the tool. And then while that's all happening, establish the framework for the sprints. We're going to do 2-week sprints. We're going to start on Mondays and we're going to end on the second Fridays. And that gives you the framework to get started and the tool that you can start using in order to have the resources, the team members share information about the project, write user stories, set up your task board views, etc.
Okay, well, I know we could get to more questions, but unfortunately we are out of time. We want to thank you all for joining us today. If you do come up with any additional questions, please feel free to send them to us at webinar@netcomlearning.com at any time. And we hope that you found today's webinar to be informative. We look forward to seeing you back here with us very soon. Also, feel free to tell your friends and colleagues about our webinars and other courses. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeff and Nishad, and have a wonderful day, everyone.